everyone. Thank you for attending. My name is Mick Ayzenberg, and today I'm here to present to you guys a tool I wrote that is an extension of the Burp Suite toolkit called AuthMatrix. And hopefully you guys will find it interesting and make your guys' lives a little easier testing authorization in web applications and web services. A little bit about myself. I'm a security engineer at Security Innovation. I've been in the industry for about 4 years now, and I've mainly been services and client work, pretty much the whole spectrum of the security sphere, all the way from web, mobile, desktop, down to the low-level embedded stuff. As far as specializations and research in the past, I've worked on fuzzing, cryptocurrencies. I'm not going to talk about that in this presentation, but if that's something that interests you, find me afterwards. And in these 4 years, I've spent a lot of time pen testing web, specifically for large tech companies. And so in this time, I've come to a few observations that I wanted to share with you guys really quickly. One thing I've noticed in this half-decade is that web security, for the most part, has gotten a lot better for new applications that are built on modern frameworks. It's been seen that by putting the effort into proper design in terms of security and research before building the application, it prevents a lot of the issues that we're so accustomed to at this point. I want to mention that, even though web security pen testing is a very, complex field, for this presentation, I want to focus it down to 3 major categories for what to do when testing. And I see these categories as input validation, configuration, and authorization and business logic. I'll talk about those in a little bit, but I want to point out that so far it looks like it's getting easier to do things the right way the first time. If you look at some of these attacks that have been so common in the past, you look at the methodologies for testing and fixing, it's gotten a lot better. XSS has gotten pretty standardized on how to test for it, how to find it, how to locate it, and there's resources online that allow you to figure out what kind of inputs to send, how to evade filters. And for fixing, it's pretty much become the known rule that output encode everything, all data. And people are starting to do this by default, which is good. That's not saying that these bugs don't exist. They sure do still exist. But they are becoming more and more rare, which I see as a good sign. Same thing with SQL injection. Same sort of process for testing, fuzzing all the inputs, evading the filters. And once again, there's a known way that's the right way to fix it, which is to use parameterized queries by default. CSRF authentication and open redirects, same kind of concept with testing now. Testers know what to look for, and it's just sort of exploring the application until you find signs that these issues exist. And as far as for fixing, this is not really left into the developers' hands to come up with their solution anymore. Really, the work is now picking the right framework that knows about these bugs and handles them by default. So what's the problem? The problem is that critical bugs are still very common in web applications and web services. And the ones I'm going to focus on today are the authorization bugs. The reason authorization is still so common is because it's still really hard to get right. It's hard to develop for, it's hard to test, it takes a lot of time, and it's going to be specific to each unique application, which makes it hard to choose the right decisions up front that's generic. I want to quickly point out the difference between authentication and authorization. Some people might disagree with the exact specifics, but for the sake of this talk, we'll think of authentication as proving who you are to the application, to the server. And this is done usually by a login, maybe a single sign-on. And at that point, it's all session management. So what kind of session tokens are used? How secure are those tokens? Where's the entropy coming in from? That's all authentication. For authorization, it's more once the server knows who we are, how do we prove that we are allowed to do what we are trying to do on the application? And the general way to do this is through permissions, through access controls, usually by assigning roles to users and having specific actions that a role can perform. So the OWASP top 10, how many times have you guys seen this yet today? I wanted to break down the OWASP top 10 in terms of what these attacks are, very briefly, don't worry, very briefly, and what the common fixes and ways of testing for them are. The darker ones are just the new ones added in the 2013, so ignore that shading there. But the first two, 5 and 9, security misconfigurations and unknown vulnerability components, this has been, the area that has been most sort of covered by automation and scanning tools. And it's, scanning tools do an all right job, whether they're external or internal static analysis tools. It's generally seen that, you can run these tools and it'll find your configuration areas, it will find the network issues, and then fixing it is just, releasing the patching schedule and fixing your configurations. The next category is what I like to consider the framework bugs. And these are the ones that have, like I was mentioning earlier, have slowly started to be fixed by default when you choose the correct framework. These include the injections, the authentications, that's a sign-on, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and unvalidated redirects. And usually by making the right decisions on how to build your app up front, these can be prevented for the most part by default, which is nice. And the last category are the specialized ones, and these are the ones that I think deal with authorization. The issue here with these ones is the framework really can't be aware of what kind of authorization plan you have. It's going to be specific to every single case. If you have an application that has users that are regular users, anonymous users, admins, there are some common ones that you'll see often, but really it's hard to generalize. You can't come up with a one-stop solution that you do by default. So it really requires thinking about it in a security context up front. Here's some authorization examples, just so we are clear what we're talking about. So the first one is going to be the OWASP top 10 number 4, which is the direct object reference. I kind of grouped them all together, but just to separate them out. You can see it's a website, and just reading the URL, you can sort of guess that it's going to return sensitive info regarding the user who has the ID 53. Accessing that ID 53 is the direct object that we are referencing in this case. The other one, number 7, was the missing function level access controls. I like to call it forced browsing. That's a more common term for what it is. And really that's, in this case, the URL is to an admin page, and it has some specific functionality that's assumed only to be available to admins. And the vulnerability comes in is if somebody who's not an admin is able to access that page, and it just assumes the user would not be able to see it because there's no link to it or something like that, and it still succeeds. And as you can see by the last example, these can be layered and happen, both the forced browsing and direct object reference. So just in case you're thinking, well, these are all GET requests, so that, if you're using POST requests like you're supposed to, this is not an issue. No, still the exact same scenario. In this case, it's the same one from before, the delete user that's admin, and it provides the ID 53 as a POST request. But any user who has a different privilege level can still attempt to make that request, and if it succeeds, that's still a hugely critical authorization issue. So let's talk a little bit about the challenges with authorization. Like I said before, it's harder to fix in a generic case with the framework. Another issue is that it is time consuming to test. As a tester, when I've tried to eliminate all chances of authorization and make sure I cover every single case and test each one, it's often a very long manual process that requires a lot of note-taking and keeping my own state. And it's hard to be verified that I did it correctly because of that, because each tester sort of works in their own way. If you're working on one project for a long time, maybe you're working on an internal product for your company, usually the situation there is to try to automate this so that you can come up with an automated solution that you can test over and over. But that being the case, it usually requires programming from scratch and can take time and is not very generic and can't be reused. And like I said there, it becomes harder to retest. So if you're testing the application for the second time after there's been changes that fix the issues, you may have to do the entire process over again. So for me, when I'm testing authorization, this is usually, unfortunately, what the process looks like. It's a manual process. The first thing I do is I enumerate all the roles of the system. And this can be interesting sometimes because it can be kind of confusing what a role of the system is. Oftentimes, you'll talk to a client and they say, well, we have a user and an admin. But that's not really the full story, because there's also the anonymous user who's expected not to be able to do anything. Maybe the admin has the ability to give permissions specifically to certain users, where the user has like read permissions or write permissions. In that case, each user with a different combination of those permissions is essentially a new role, right? So enumerating all the roles, the next step is the classic pen testing, explore the application, use the functionality, how it's intended to be used, so you have a full map of everything that is in scope. And after that, you create users for each one of those roles and authenticate them and get the tokens required to perform requests. And after that is this horrible manual for loop that is so prone to error, where if you look at it as a for loop, we generate every single combination of role user request that is needed to confirm that there's no issues. And we run the request, we see the result, we look at the results and determine, did this work? Is this user in any roles where this should work? If not, that's an issue. And we record our results, and usually it turns into a big notepad checklist, at least for me, and it gets pretty messy. And in that for loop is so much opportunity for a tester to have human error. I mean, we all like to think that we are, disciplined enough to be able to test this and make no mistakes, but having such a long manual process just by default opens it up to human error. So this picture right here is a picture of a threat model, sort of access matrix that is kind of common. Even if a tester doesn't have it in their routine to generally build a threat model, this is something that we kind of build in our brains implicitly. I want to describe what we're looking at a little bit. What we see here is on the left side are our assets, our protected information of the system. In this case, it's going to be employee information like their name, social security number. On the right-hand side, we have all of the roles. So you can see there's the role for anonymous user, an employee, a manager, an admin. And then we have what we call the CRUD model, which is create, read, update, and delete. And these are the actions that we can perform on these assets. And so generally we build either on paper or in a document or just in our brain an idea of which users, which roles are allowed to perform these actions. We sort of build this table. And if you look just to sort of interpret it a little bit, you can see if you go to the employee and employee name, you can see that they should never be able to delete an employee name. Makes sense. And they should sometimes be able to like read or update it, right? And what I mean by sometimes is, in this case, the employee would have access to their own employee information, not any other employee in the system. However, if you look over, it has the manager, which in this case is an always. So they always have the ability to see a name or update the name. Makes sense. And so what I was wanting to do is, we have this awful process of manual testing for authorization, and we have this beautiful table that we sort of build like implicitly. If we could combine these two and sort of make the process more easier and eliminate the need for human, or the possibilities of human error, that would be great. And so that's where the idea for AuthMatrix came in. So AuthMatrix. Here's a list of some of the design goals that I had going into the project. The big one being an intuitive UI. If it's confusing and doesn't really help in the testing flow, and it becomes a task that's not really worth doing, it's not going to get used. So I wanted to make sure that this is easy enough to look at and work with, so that it is it's something that assists and doesn't hurt the process of testing. Because it's hard to automate for the creation of roles and creation of users, because they're all going to be different in each system, I figured the solution was to move all of that work up front, just in the same way that we build a threat model in the beginning of the project once we've explored. And so we'd have this mapping of the conditions of our tables of users and roles and requests all up front. And once that's been done and you can look and verify and check your work, then I want just a simple click and run interface, right? By doing this, I was hoping that it would reduce the chance of human errors by sort of like, pulling out that for loop that we saw earlier. And I want to make sure that this application covered at least 90% of the test scenarios, because if this is really cool but it can only be used for a couple target applications, it's not really worth it. I wanted to add in reproducible testing, so that way once it's been tested once and you have a solution, maybe you can test again to confirm. Maybe after it's been patched and updated and fixed, you can just run it simply again without having to do the work again and have your new results. And yeah, big thing, make life easier. If it's difficult to use, if it's complicated, it's not going to get used. There's no point to it. So The platform that I decided to use to build this application, I chose Burp Suite. Biggest reason is it's widely used. I use it for practically every single web application and web service engagement that I'm ever on. It has a lot of power, has a lot of functionality, and it's very, very simple to use and get used to. Basically, you set it up as an attack proxy. Requests go from the browser through Burp, and you can view every single HTTP request in full as it goes through. And from there, you can make modifications, you can fuzz, you can tamper with it, you can take a request and send it directly from Burp and avoid the process of using a browser altogether. It's just really nice, so I wanted to build it from there. And luckily, Burp Suite has this extender API that it added a few years ago. And this allows you to basically customize Burp and add new features to it by using their APIs. Really, really nice. They have the APIs in multiple languages, which is great. Burp is written in Java, but they also support Python and Ruby. And I'm a Python guy, so I thought that's perfect. I'll just use Python. But some of the features that you can do with the Burp Suite extender APIs are creating new tabs within Burp. You can send requests just manually constructed from the HTTP level, just turn it into a request. You can modify every single request going through Burp. So if you want to make a modification to every header that goes through Burp, you can do that. You can format data types to make it easier for you to read and work well with. That includes like JSON, or if there's JavaScript and you want to make it pretty, you can do that. And you can update the Burp in-house scanner to search for the specialized vulnerabilities that you're looking for. So if you're working with a framework which has a specific type of vulnerability, it can be extended inside Burp to catch those. Here's a list of some extensions that have been written by Burp, for Burp in the past. This one, the top one, is one that I have used on projects all the time, and that's writing a Burp extension for API signatures. So if you're using a web service and they have private key per user, and they sign the message and then put that signature inside the header, this can all be done with Burp so that it happens on the fly, and you don't have to worry about it, and you can just tamper with data and know that the signature is going to be correct. Makes testing really easy. But some other extensions that people have made in the past are scanning for Heartbleed, integrating with other tools such as like Nmap, pulling up the list of targets from Nmap, and just general logging and note-taking that helps accelerate your methodology. Burp also includes the Burp App Store, or BAP Store, which makes it really nice. So rather than having to search all of GitHub and all of the internet to find all these cool extensions that you want to use, right within inside the application, there's a store which offers free extensions, and it just makes it simple so you can click install and then just start using it. So when I searched through there, I found a couple auth extensions, and I want to make sure that the work I was doing was not something that already exists, and it was something new and helpful.
Does it work with both the free version and the pro version?
I don't know if the Burp App Store does, but AuthMatrix does work with the free version. So, but I did find several auth extensions, and after reviewing and trying them out, it didn't fit the needs that I was looking for. It didn't fit those criteria. The big thing is it still kind of came down to the one request at a time. You would just have a way of switching the cookies, and then it'd still be a manual process of comparing it and then determining, is this user somebody who should have this response in this request? And more so, often the UI was just confusing, and it doesn't make sense to spend the time getting used to this application or the extension when it may not be helpful. A lot of people just default back to their manual processes. All right, so now we're going to start the dreaded live demo. Are you guys ready for this? Hopefully this goes as smoothly as I want. So for the live demo, we have a sample application that is going to be our target, and we're going to set up AuthMatrix to have a configuration that tests the auth cases of this application. And the target that we chose is actually the hackathon that my company, Security Innovation, builds, and it's super, super nice. It's a web-based hackathon that integrates with a scoring system so that you find a bug, you find cross-site scripting, and there's a nice little pop-up that comes up and indicates, and it has a scoreboard that you can look at, and then rate yourself compared to other users. And the one that we're going to use today is our sample HR website. So we'll explore this really quickly. And before I do this, though, actually, Let me see if I can. Let's change the screen to duplicate. Anybody know the hotkey in Mac to change screen? It's just display. Mirror displays.
I think it's under
Arrangements. Ah, there we go. Boom, got it. Woo! All right, live demo going okay so far. Yes, yes. So before we do that, I want to show you guys, it also has a section where you can see the completed challenges. So if we go there, and the internet stays okay. There we go. We can see a list of all the challenges that I've completed so far. So just want to point out there's only one done so far. But I'll show you what it looks like when you actually solve a challenge here. So one common one is going to be SQL injection on the login screen. I'm going to give these away. We're also running this hackathon right now as we speak. If you go to the Security Innovation booth, you can get a username and mess around with it, on your own time for the next 2 days. So if you're interested in doing that, here's some answers right here. But I'm going to do just the classic SQL injection here to log in. Can do the same for password. And yeah, 200 points. Cool. But let's quickly just explore the application and see what we're dealing with, because that's, I'm going to skim through it because it's a large application. But that would be the first step here is see your target and enumerate every single functionality and endpoint. So in here we have timesheets, we have payment information. It might be best if I start to tether. We have pay stubs, preferences, profile information, all things that are normal for an employee. And then we have these other two tabs here, management, which is for the specific manager role. And in there you can look at employees, approve timesheets, approve time off, reviews, and generate various reports as well. And then another section that is specifically for admin, or HR as they call them, is to create employees, to view all employees, and other reporting features. Looks like Hannah Cook, the user that we logged into with the SQL injection, is all three of those roles. She's an admin, manager, and a regular employee. Let's log in to some test accounts that I made recently, just to see what it looks like if you don't have those roles. Super secret password, it's password. In this case, there's no functionality to access those admin and management abilities, so we can assume that those are specific for those role types and shouldn't be accessible from an employee without those permissions. But it's the same kind of features here. All right, so AuthMatrix. What is our first step? First step is go to the tab here with AuthMatrix. Can everybody see all right? Is it going to be large enough? Okay, let me know if it's too small and I learned the nifty zoom in feature, just in case. So let's define the roles. So in each system, there's usually going to be an anonymous, even if it has no permissions. So we're going to define anonymous. And we see, comes up right here. And we have three other types of roles. We have employee, we have, manager, and we have our HR or admin. All right, let's see if we can make this. There we go, a little better. All right. And now we assign the rules, and we want to make sure that we have a good combination of users so that each kind of case that we care about is going to be here and testable. So when we create users, once again, we want the anonymous user. We're going to have just one regular employee, the one I just logged in. We're going to have someone who is just a manager. And we're going to have someone who is just admin. All right. So here's our matrix right now. And the first step is to define which roles do these users exist in. So anonymous is just going to be an anonymous. Just check that here. Employee is just going to be an employee. Manager is going to be a manager, but also an employee. And HR is going to be HR and also employee, because every authenticated user is going to be employee, right? And this I learned just by exploring the application. The next step is to find the requests, find the actions that are being performed, and add them. So easy way to do that is to go to, oh, 1 second. Here's a second hiccup. I did not have my proxy on when I was exploring the first time, so it didn't record all the requests that I was making. So we're going to do that really quickly again in speed mode. Come on, internet. Oh. Proxy. Duh. All right. We're going to do the 1 equals 1 again, just to have someone who has all of the access. Cool. I'm just going to quickly step through and make each one of these requests, just so we have the baseline of what actions we have. Boom, 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 boom. Almost done. Cool. From here, you can take away the browser. So let's go to the target page, and now we have our target. Cool. So from here, we can see that we have all these requests that we just made. Here's the get request to reviews, and you can see the response. And I'm just going to grab a bunch of them all at once. I'm just going to grab all of these get requests, and we'll start with just one for now, and I'll add the rest later. But it's easy. You right-click it, you say send to AuthMatrix. Now when you go to AuthMatrix, you have this request right here. If your URL is unmanageable, you can modify it to change it to whatever it might be. So it can just be review or like employee reviews. But in this case, I'm going to keep it as the request just because the URLs are easy enough to follow in this application. The next thing we see here is the success regex. So this is the condition that AuthMatrix is going to look for to determine whether the request succeeded in the action or failed. The default we have here is just looking for a 200 OK. In this application, that works perfect because it responds with a 200 whenever it succeeds, and a 303 unauthorized user when it fails. So we're just going to leave it like this. But otherwise, you would just add in whatever you're looking for from the response to indicate that it succeeded or failed. So let's quickly check this and say which users are allowed to see this. Anonymous user would not be allowed because they are not authenticated, and employees are allowed. From there, you can simply just right-click it and run requests, or you can press the button at the bottom that just says run. And we see your results. Oh, I missed a very important step. So why did this not work? It's because I haven't added any session tokens to these users yet. So this is the next step. So now we have all of our users defined. We want to authenticate each user. The easiest way here is to find where I logged in before, grab this specific request, send it to the repeater, and then modify this. So I'm going to do test employee 1. Password is password. And you can see it says redirect to home, set this session ID. So here's your cookie. You just grab this, and this is for employee 1, and then just add it right here into the session token area if you want to expand that just to see it. Cool. So let's do that for the rest of the users really quick. The next one is test manager. Sweet. And then one more is test HR. Done. And the last one are anonymous. We just give it the cookie, but take away the value, so it's an empty cookie. All right, now let's try running it one more time. Everything's configured correctly. Press run. Boom, and it all succeeded. To verify it succeeded, we just click the request. We see our original here. We can see the session ID that it was originally with. The response was a 200. We can go to anonymous user and see that the session ID has been cleared, and look at the response. It has a 303 telling you to log in. And then each other user has a 200 OK and was requested with their session tokens specifically. If you're going to make post requests to an application that has CSRF, you can also enter in the CSRF token right here. So far, it's only supporting static tokens. So if the CSRF token is having the same lifetime as a session token, which is pretty common in most applications, even though it's not the most secure, you can just enter that in right here. All right, so now we got the first one done. Let's go ahead and just add a bunch more. So let's add these two to AuthMatrix. Let's go into our admin here and add all of these guys. These are all just the requests that I made, simple GET requests to areas of the page that should only be accessed by those users. And let's add some manager-specific ones. Sweet. So now we have all our requests here, and let's just go through. Anonymous shouldn't make any requests to any of these. All employees should be able to access these two. These ones are specific to admin, which is equivalent to HR. So we go through and check all of those. And we have manager here for the rest of them. Awesome. Now we just run it. Let's see what we find. Boom. So the red indicates that there was an issue. It could be something configuration, so we'll double check it and make sure, you know, it's possible that I mistyped something and it's a false positive. But if it's not, that's basically an indication of an authorization bypass bug. And in some cases can be very critical. So let's verify this one. This one was to admin user list. Anonymous user had a 303, that's expected. HR, which is the only one who should be allowed to see this page. I'll render it just so you see like what kind of information you're getting from this request. You're getting a list of every single user in the system. So HR succeeded, and it's showing red on employee and manager. And as you can see, those ones succeeded as well, even though those users with those session tokens did not have the proper permissions to access this page. It still was able to produce the results, and this vulnerability was caught. Same thing with these ones as well. As you can see, there was no access controls on these requests, and so all of them succeeded, and AuthMatrix caught that. If you look at this one, this is where an admin user, it did not succeed. It looks like the authorization was successful. And if we double check this by saying, did employee 1 catch it, it says, boom, authorization error. So this is where the application acted as it was supposed to. All right, let's stick back to the slides really quick. Yeah.
Dependent on using HTTP static codes strategically to indicate.
So the default one is, but as you can see in right here, we have these success registers, and that pretty much allows you to say, like, look for anything that I'm looking for specifically in the request. So it might be, in a case where it will show you like the username or just like a page. You can type in a regex that will catch it.
Okay, anywhere in the response.
Anywhere in the response.
Right.
Yep, exactly. All right. So now let's take that and revise our methodology that had that awful manual for loop with so much room for human error. And let's take a look at how we do it now. Still starts out the same. We explore the target application. We add all the functionality endpoints to AuthMatrix. We go through in that target list, and after enumerating the entire page, add each one. We define all the roles and users of the system that we need, fill out those tables. And then we define the success conditions to determine so that the tool can automatically figure out whether it succeeded or it did not. After that, we just generate the session tokens one time, plug them all in, run, and then save and repeat. Way easier, way nicer. Here's a couple of tips and tricks. The majority of cases you're going to find if you're testing a web application will be where cookies are the tokens being used. AuthMatrix supports both headers and cookies if they put the token in the HTTP headers. Easy way it does that is it looks for what you enter in, and if it's equals, it knows it's a cookie. If it's a colon, like it's seen in HTTP headers, it pops it right into the HTTP headers. So one thing I didn't show you on the last demo, but I'm going to show you in the next one, is the ability to save and load these configs. There was a save and load button near the very bottom. And this allows you to, once you fill out these tables and define these roles, you can just save it and serialize it to disk, and then load it up at a separate time and add in new session tokens and run it again. Makes it much easier. The issue here is you're serializing data to disk and then unserializing that data into the application, which, if anybody follows serialization bugs, is prone to security flaws all the time. So my recommendation, I give you a little warning message when you try to do it, is don't load any untrusted configs. Make sure this is a config that you saved yourself or it came from a verified source, just to prevent any kind of risk whatsoever. And I'm a security guy. I get paranoid about these things, so I leave a big warning message there. And the other thing is parameters can matter in authorization as well. So if we talk about that part of the OWASP Pop 10, the insecure direct object reference, where in the example it was using the user ID and making action on that, this can also be handled pretty well with AuthMatrix. And I'm going to demonstrate that really quickly here. All right, is it still? Yes, sweet. Oh, one other thing I want to check really quick. So it has these 4 results here that have issues. Let's go look at our scoreboard really quick and see how that compares. Boom. Okay, so it has a SQL injection from the first one, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4 results. So by using AuthMatrix like this, even though we didn't get to pop up with the oh yeah or whatever noise, we still got the points for it, and it registered as the series vulns. But in this case, okay, so we were talking about direct object reference. So if we go to a functionality like the pay stub section here, you can see that this pay stub has a get parameter here, the user ID, with a user 1. And in this case, it's for that Hannah Cook, the one we were able to log into with SQL injection. So let's just add a new user really quick. We're going to add a new user, make it Hannah Cook. We can just go to our repeater and grab the last request because that's who Hannah Cook is authenticated as. Just grab this one just in case. Grab that token. Plug that in here. And Hannah Cook, as you can see by looking at the web interface, has all the privileges. She's both a manager and HR. So we'll just check all of the boxes here. But what we can do here is we can also add a new role. During client assessments, usually they'll give us a list of roles, and we'll say we need test accounts for at least 2 of each of those roles. And this allows us to do cross-user testing, right? So in order to sort of replicate that in AuthMatrix, all you need to do is say user ID 1. And now you have a new role. And the only user who can be user ID 1 is this Hannah Cook. And I'll show you how I'll use that in a second. None of this changes because this still is all dependent on whether you're employee, manager, or HR. But if I go to that request, pay stubs, and I grab this one that was only going to return for Hannah Cook, that user 1, and I send to AuthMatrix. Now I can select only user ID 1 should succeed there. It's going to only choose Hannah Cook as the one successful option. And I can just run this request. And as you can see, all users were able to see the pay stubs of Hannah Cook. So this is once again an issue. And just to double check here, do we get points for it? Yes, list another user's pay stubs via query tampering. Awesome. All right. To help with this, because sometimes looking at the URL, if it's not included in the get parameters or post parameters, it may get kind of tricky if you want to have multiple users trying to get pay stubs. So I can just rewrite this as pay stubs for user 1. Makes it a little bit easier. So now, assuming that I've gone through the entire application and mapped everything, I can then go to the process of saving. I'll just save this as demo.state and then clear it. And if I ever, say they fix the problems and we want to do some regression testing, all I have to do is load up the old state. It warns me, are you sure you want to load this? Is deserializing data is scary? Yes, we do, because we just created it. Fine. And then you can see it's all back up. The results don't show. That's just an issue with using the Burp API. But everything else is saved, and you can just, once again, run it, run as many as you want to run. And just reconfirm the same results as last time. Awesome. Live demo. All right, back to the slides. So here's a picture basically demonstrating exactly what we just did. Um, so here's some current limitations on using AuthMatrix. Like I said before, right now, it only supports static CSRF tokens. If you have, if you're doing your application right and you have CSRF tokens that expire on every single request, AuthMatrix is not currently going to be able to handle that. But that is the rare case, unfortunately, and so it still fits within my 90% of targets threshold. There's currently no support for multiple session tokens. If you have more than one cookie that identifies a user, that won't work at this point as well. And it's a bummer that right now success detection has to be a regex. Other areas of burp have a much more clean interface where you can look into the response and sort of grab the section that you want, and it'll handle all the regexing automatically. That might come in the future. Right now, you'll have to learn a little bit about regexing, but it's not too tough. There's no support for web service signature support, but like I said before, there are other extensions that you can either build yourself or use to create signatures and put them in the headers automatically. If done correctly, these two apps can integrate very, very well. A common way I've done is by having the signature extension look for a header like user1, admin1, and it just grabs that header and replaces it with the signature. And if that's the case, you can do the exact same thing with AuthMatrix and just enter in that user1, and it should work as well. One more thing it doesn't currently cover is permission exceptions. And what I mean by that is the rare case where an application says something like, here's an action, admins can do that action, managers can do that action, but if a user is both an admin and a manager, it shouldn't succeed. This is definitely the rare situation for role-based modeling, access control modeling, but because of that, I left it out, and it would be too confusing to get into this first edition of AuthMatrix. All right, so what is next? Open sourced. It's going to be free. It's going to be open source. It's going to be available on our Security Innovation GitHub page. That will be available in the next week, I think, sometime in this next week. As far as for the next edition of AuthMatrix, Burp has this thing that is pretty not well known within Burp, where it can use macros and just custom little directives to renew session tokens automatically and to renew CSRF tokens. And it does provide an API to access this functionality, so that'll be something I'm exploring. And the last slides are out of date because I said I was going to submit it to the Burp App Store for free download, but I found out today that it was approved, and it is currently on the Burp App Store for free download. So check it out. And that's it. Questions? Yes?
So it was a really manual process to build your template.
Mm-hmm.
To go through and click every page and every link.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any way to spider that, or any other Burp apps that will do that?
Burp does have a spider. I generally avoid using it because my experience is, when you're using a spider, it might perform actions that you aren't aware of. Such as, let's say there's an issue where a delete user is unauthenticated and it's a GET request, and the Burp spider just goes and does that automatically, and all of a sudden you have no users in the system, and you can't really explain why that happened. So I generally think of it as a manual process, and it's just the methodology that I tend to use. But if you want to risk using spider, it will fill out the targets page in the same way. But really, it's important to note that when testing authorization, it's important that the user has an understanding of, here's my request, this should succeed and this shouldn't succeed. And what AuthMatrix allows is you to do all that work up front, check your work, and then let the testing and recording and confirming results be done by the application. So, yes?
Is there anywhere where you're documenting these scenarios that you're going through so that future people can maintain it? If there is ever a regression.
Sure. Other than saving and reloading the configs, there's currently nothing inside AuthMatrix for documentation. That has been a feature that somebody has mentioned to me before that they'd like, maybe having commenting attached to some of the requests. I'll look into it. Other than that, it's still kind of a take your own notes. It's just less about here. The notes are recording all my results that are so important. So.
So when you deliver the results after you do security testing, or even pre-security testing, how do you show somebody what you're trying to do, like a plan or something that documents what the approaches you're taking, so then another expert can analyze it and to see if it's sufficient or not?
Sure. I would make the claim that the table themselves are kind of the proof, like sort of using the source as the docs. That doesn't mean that, you know, if somebody wants to include their own, you know, more the easier to read, more explanation report, that's definitely something that can be, you know, highly encouraged. But right now there's no support for that within the app. The app just sort of allows the functionality of making those tests. But, yeah. Yes.
Have you thought of ways to integrate the functionality? Because I think this is a great kind of assessment tool.
Mhm.
If you're doing manual assessment, it takes a lot of time. Maybe a way to integrate it into like integration testing or unit testing or that kind of thing, so that, you know, maybe a new version of software comes out, you can empower your developer to just like click a button and rerun the test basically to check the same authorization.
Sure.
Test.
I definitely wrote this with testers in mind, but I think that's a great idea, and it's definitely something to keep in mind. And if you have any great ideas about it, it's going to be open source, and I'd love to hear any opinions. So,
That's the right answer.
yes.
It'll be open source.
Yep. All right. I think we're just about out of time, so thank you, everybody, and let me know if you have any questions.